Hey everybody, what's up? Brad Hussey here, and this is the Art, Business, and Craft of Web Design. And today is another lesson of our free web design course. And this lesson is all about grids. All right, once again, Brad Hussey here, and this is the free web design course. And today we're going to be digging into grids and why grids matter, layout, and how you can use grids, kind of the principles behind grids, and so on and so forth. So, well, that's not supposed to be there. Okay, here we go. Using grids in web design. What are grids? Well, grids are the structure, the underlying structure for your website. Any good website is built on a grid, and I'll show you that. Okay, I'll prove it. I'll back that up. Grids, they help with layout, they help with structure, organization, alignment. They keep everything just tickety-boo so that what you're looking at doesn't look like a total mess. Doesn't look like just a scrapboard or something like that. You're not scrapbooking when you're building your website. You're creating organization and alignment, and you're organizing information in a meaningful way, and grids will help you do that. The layouts, they will differ depending on the device. So at one point, websites were only viewed on desktop computers with a square screen dimension, and they use tables still for layouts. Tables, like if you were to open like Google Sheets or whatever, and you create a spreadsheet. That's how web design used to be created, for layouts. That's really old school web design, but you'd use a table, and then you'd put some content here in these few sections and merge those cells. And then you have this for a sidebar. And that's how they used layouts before we had more modern techniques and tools and software and languages for building websites. Now we get to use really cool ways of creating grids. And I'll get into the technology behind it in a little bit here. But now that we have other devices, we got really large, beautiful, amazing, delicious, wonderful, expensive, perfect, better than Microsoft computer, massive screens like mine. And they, that's a lot. You got to design for that, right? And then we also got these things, okay? That's a new screen size, whether you're looking at it this way or you're looking at it this way. We've got tablets that have different screen dimensions. We've got all sorts of devices that we look at and engage with websites and web applications. And we have to organize that information depending on what you look. So if you're looking at a website on your desktop or your tablet or your smartphone, the layout has to change. Otherwise, you're going to have this really large layout, and then it's just going to be like squished in on your site, and you have to pinch and zoom, and it's a mess. Nobody likes that. So layouts will help with that. And you can choose different layouts depending on the device. Now, also, it makes it easier to design layouts and organize information. When you're working with a grid underlying everything, now the front-end user doesn't really see the grid. They interact with it, but it's in the background. It's like a blueprint. It's like the underlying structure, the frame, and it helps to organize information. So when you're designing, it's nicer for the designer to know, okay, this is where I'm going to place the main content, the body content, the sidebar, the opt-in box, the main hero section, the navigation, the footer, and so on and so forth. Or maybe a series of videos, a gallery of images. It helps with design. You don't have to come up with different ideas. You just have something to work with. And for the user experience, for the end user, it's just easier for them to interact with the website when it's on a grid. Okay, now you're going to need to know some jargon, and I'm going to illustrate it. I'm going to sketch kind of these terms as well. But there are a few terms that are used when it comes to grids: container, columns, rows, modules, gutters, and margins. The container is the frame. Let me just switch my screen here. So the container is the frame around the entire website. So imagine what you're looking at is just like a blank web page, and I have overlaid here a frame. Sorry, I have overlaid a grid here on the screen, and let's call this section here. So this whole nice lines there, Brad. Beautiful. Okay. That what I tried to draw there. Oh, now it's not even working. Right here. Boom, boom, the whole thing. Just imagine a box around the whole thing. That is your container. It contains everything. The container could be fixed width, so always the same width. The container could be fluid. The container can be responsive. I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but the container is just the frame around the entire thing. And the frame can change in size, or it can be fixed and always the same size. But that's the container, okay? So now that we've got the container, what do we got next? Well, we've got columns. What are columns? Columns are the vertical strippy sections. That is the technical term, by the way. That is the proper industry standard. The next time you're working on a site with a developer or designer, or you get hired at a job, make sure you always refer to the columns as the strippy sections, the vertical strippies, okay? But don't quote me on that. Now, here are the columns. Look at that. Boom. That is a column. Boop, 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 boop. Another column right here. Now, excuse my this isn't really straight lines I'm drawing here. Okay. I chose to use an iPad to illustrate grids, which require straight lines, when I could have just used Photoshop and I could have just done it that way, but we're not going to go there. Okay. So yeah, these little pink bars here, as you can see, those are the columns, okay? Columns. Okay, those are your columns. Now, rows are the next term you need to know. Rows are the horizontal strippy sections. So let's give you a new layer here. These are rows, okay? As you see them, and they could be small rows. We'll get into that in a little bit, but these are rows. Got that? Got your notes? Perfect writing too. Next, we've got modules, okay? Modules in terms of the grid are the intersection between the columns and the rows. So let's say we've got ourselves a nice column here, and we've got ourselves a happy little row here. Okay, this, that is a module. Boop. Okay, and there are lots of modules depending on where you intersect. So let's say we've got another row here, or sorry, column. There's your column, and we've got another delicious, wonderful, happy little row. And then what is that? That is another module. So those are modules. Modules are helpful when, say, you're creating a layout and you have images or gallery of images. So let me just, for example, give you just like an example here. So let's say you've got yourself a container. Okay, there's your container, and you've got yourself a main like section on your site, or a section where you want to illustrate like gallery of images. So maybe you've got boom, 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 like this. Okay, these sections, these little modules that I'm drawing here, I'm trying to keep them on the grid. Those are modules, okay? And those modules could be like images, a gallery of images, but you could see these modules, they intersect at, you know, there's a row right there, there's a column right there. So, and there's your module, and there's another module, okay? I hope this is communicating clearly. Those are your modules, okay? Modules. Hate that word. It's a weird word. Okay. Next, we've got gutters. Gutters are the spaces in between columns and rows. So, you see here these little white spaces. Let me just draw you another. Whoa. Here is your column. Okay, and then we're going to do, let's do a row. We'll do another column, and we'll just do another row here. Honestly, this is just absolute garbage, what I'm drawing for you here. I don't think you're going to understand anything of what I'm talking about. So let's just get rid of this layer underneath it for now. Okay, and that looks bad too. Oh my goodness. Best web design lesson you have ever taken on the internet. Okay, so boom, there is a row. Then we've got another row, column, column. I don't think this is going to communicate. Oh my gosh. Going back to square one here, folks. I'm just looking at the overlay here. And if I zoom in on this, okay, you can already see the pink lines here are your columns. Okay, there's your column. And the lines that are already drawn for you here, those are rows. Okay, and you can see the columns. Now, see this space right here? Watch. See this space in between right here? And this space right here? And this space right here? And here? If you're seeing that, those are the gutters. The gutters are the white space in between. In between, so horizontally and vertically. So this white strip here, that is a gutter. But then also in between here, that is a gutter. Okay? Gutters are the spaces in between. Gutter, gutter, gutter. Now gutters can be lots of, they can be big, they can be small, they can be really tight. So if you were to have modules that are like close together. So right now, using this example, we've got, let's say this is a module and this is a module. This is another module. So the space in between all of this, those are gutters. Now you could have larger space or smaller space between the gutters. Right now, we've probably got like what, 20 pixels or something roughly in between. 30 pixels is a pretty standard space in between for your gutters, but you might have larger gutters. Like, let's say you've got a module here and a module here. Now on this grid, it kind of looks like, let me just do this. Okay, this space in between, those are gutters. I hope that makes sense. Gutters is that space in between the rows and the columns. Now what's next are the margins. Now margins are the outside space on the content. Margins are this here. That space there and that space there. That is margin. Okay, margin is the outside. It could be 30 pixels, 60 pixels. You can decide. Standard is like usually 30 pixels per side, but really it doesn't matter. It's up to you as long as it's consistent. So your margins are on the outside of your frame, your container there. And the gutters are in between, vertically and horizontally. And those would be your gutters. Okay, now just as a really, really quick review there, we've got your container, the outside, the columns are the vertical sections, the rows are the lengthwise sections, or the horizontal. Modules are the blocks intersecting between columns and rows. Gutters are the spaces in between the columns and rows, both vertically and horizontally, and the margins are the outer space of the content. Now, thanks for bearing with me on that. Now you probably want to know what kind of grids are there. Well, there's lots of different grids, and you can have them. You can make them whatever you want them to be. So you've probably seen common layouts like a standard. And I don't know if there's actual names for this. You can call it whatever, but a standard, let's say a blog layout using a grid. Let's say you've got up here. Now this is a really rough wireframe. You got like your header section up at the top here. So this is like your nav bar, and then let's say you got like let's actually go like this. We're gonna say this section right here is gonna be the title of the post, And then you got like main body. Actually, the main body is probably going to be bigger. That's your body for the article. And then you got like a sidebar. Very, very standard kind of layout that you'd have on just any blog or WordPress website. It's pretty ordinary, but pretty expected. You see it. It's very common. You know, if I were to go to like Webflow here and show you Webflow's website here, you can see kind of layout and grids in action right now. A lot of full width here, but you could see 3 columns in this section. If I were to go down, maybe they have a blog. Like if I were to go to resources, blog, let's check out their blog layout. So here's like a blog post. They have a huge hero section here. And then they have on their grid. So here's the container on the outside. That's the container. And let's say this is on a 12 column grid. They're probably adding some, there's probably like 1, 2, 3 columns that they're not using and 3 columns that they're not using to give white space. And then if I'm using a 12 column grid, we got 3 and 6. So we got 6 columns here. So it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's very rough. I'm just estimating that they're using that. And so there's probably about 6 columns centered, and they have their content in the center there. Now their images, you can see they're outside of that probably 6 columns of the content. They're adding another column on the outside, on either side, to just kind of give the image a bit more presence and to break that flow so it's not so linear and boring. Now there's no sidebar here because sidebars are kind of out of style now in blogs, so that you can just focus on the reading. But I'm willing to bet that if I go to the bottom here, they have like a footer, where they have, you might also like, and here we go. So this is 2 columns, 1, 2, but really it's probably out of the 12 columns, they're using probably like 5 columns here, 5 columns here. So it's 5 and 10, and then, 11, 12. I mean, really, I'm just estimating. So they're putting, it's a 2 column grid, and the gutter here, their gutter is larger. So you see this gutter here? This is a gutter, whereas this is margin. Margin, gutter. Now if I were to go down, probably to the footer, here we go, perfect example. So another grid. So look at this right here. Here's their margin, margin, gutter, gutter, gutter. So probably what, like 60 pixels of gutter, or it could be percentage based on the size of the screen. Okay. And this is 1, 2, 3 columns. So to make a kind of modular style. So as you can see, what we talked about, we got a module, 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 module. It's a modular grid. And so that's a modular layout. Footer layouts, typically you'd see this on most websites with lots of information organized. We got 4 columns here organized. We got a column, 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 and that's where they organize their information in the footer. So that would be kind of a, this would be a linear layout for a blog post with large margins on either side. You would have a blog style layout with a sidebar, like I showed you here on the iPad, where you've got a sidebar on the side, you've got a body that takes up probably 3/4, 60 to 80% of the main content, either on the left side or the right side. Modular is where you have kind of like a gallery. So that would be like a modular layout. And then you could also have layouts that incorporate mobile devices. So you won't have this space, this full space on a mobile device. A mobile device like your iPhone is probably more like when it's held up and down, you're looking at something like, you have about this much space on your screen, okay? And so instead of doing the traditional kind of layout where you've got like a modular layout, which is harder to see on a smaller screen, you'd probably do something more where you stack those that modular layout, you'd probably stack it like this. So you got a vertical layout so that you can interact and engage on your phone. And so that would be kind of using responsive design to respond to the screen size. A larger screen size, you can accommodate layouts that have that use up the whole space, the whole width, but something that doesn't have a lot of width to it, so you could still engage. You're not going to have that side-by-side modular layout. You're going to have something that's more vertical and stacked. So when designing with grids versus coding with grids, you know, if you're using a tool like Photoshop or Adobe XD or any other wireframing tool, you can turn on grids, you can add an image overlay, you can turn on guides, and then you can actually design and outline things and organize your layout with the grid that's already installed. And then if you are coding with grids, like in your in an editor, when you're coding up your website, you can use frameworks. You can code them yourself. So frameworks would be something like Bootstrap. So for example, Bootstrap has a grid system baked in, and you could use their grid system. So if you were to code this snippet of HTML, it would give you this layout right here, and so on and so forth. Outside of the scope of this video, I've got lots of Bootstrap stuff on this channel, but that's how you'd use a framework like Bootstrap or Foundation, or there's lots of different frameworks for CSS grids and website grids. Webflow has grids built in. So if you're using a builder tool, you can actually build the grid and you can set the settings. You can add grids. Like for example, here at the bottom, I'm just trying to get there. So here's a grid. You can see here, this is a row, this is a column, and you can see the gutters. These have large gutters as I've set them just as an example. So here are your gutters, as you can see, being highlighted. I can change the size of the gutters by simply dragging like that, vertically and horizontally. And so those are your gutters. These are your modules. And so if I were to change the screen size, the layout of the design here, the mock-up, would change. So we've got vertical sections stacked on top of one another here versus having them side by side when viewing on a large screen, where I have the room and the space to add things side by side, and more of a, you know, side by side layout, a modular layout, you know, a main content, a sidebar, you know, a grid based layout. That's how I would use that in, say, a tool like Webflow. And now if I were to use back to coding it yourself, you can, instead of using a framework, you can actually just code it yourself using Flexbox or CSS grids, which are pretty new, exciting discoveries or inventions rather in the coding world, in the web design world, when you're coding up sites outside of the scope of this video. But grids are at the foundation of everything that you are going to be designing. You're going to be designing to create layouts, to organize content, to align everything, to make sure that you have a structure and a format. And then you can use that for wireframing and designing, organizing content. You can use it in your design editor. You can use it when you're coding, using frameworks. There's lots of different ways to incorporate grids. And hopefully, as you can see, using grids in web design is key. It's fundamental, and you need to, when you start designing, before you even start wireframing, and maybe you don't know what that is, we'll talk about that in another video, make sure that you're using a grid to organize your content and your layouts, and use that grid all the way through, from coming up with your ideas all the way to executing and launching the final product. So hopefully that video was helpful to you, explaining grids in web design, and make sure that you Subscribe, like the video, hit the notification bell, comment on this video. Tell me if you have any questions about grids or if you have any questions about web design and getting started with web design, because that's going to help me with our next lessons in this series. Thanks again. You're awesome, and we'll catch you in another video.